Welcome back. It's Joe Volpe, the publisher of the Corriere Canadese, here on behalf of Corcan Media Group and Go Live TV to deal with the issues as we have been dealing over the course of the last week, especially related to immigration. I have with me once again Richard Borax, noted immigration lawyer, and I want to thank you once again for coming here.
Always a pleasure.
Especially because we have this one issue that I'd like to deal with today, and that's the question of children being separated from parents.
That's right.
That's the issue we've been talking about for a while. But before we begin, I want to say something really positive about a decision that was reached today regarding the Bruno and Ariana family. This is a couple who have been integrated. They've been here for 4 years. They've been without papers. That means they're undocumented workers, or in the language of other people, they're either irregular or illegal. Now, how many such people there are, we'll talk about that in a minute. Anyway, they got an extensive reprieve of their condition. They're not going to be removed anytime soon, and that's a positive thing. And I want to smile. I hope you agree with me. That's a great decision because it means that the system, no matter how negative we can describe it, every now and then gives us a glimmer of hope.
The courts. The federal court gave us a glimmer of hope. They did the right thing.
Good. So, how many such people are there? Well, if you'll bring up that graphic again, the business of how many people are here on an irregular basis or who are undocumented, well, there's apparently 1 million of them in Canada.
That's
Richard,
right.
1 million. Where does that number come from?
That comes from Her Majesty.
Her Majesty, not the Queen.
Well, the government of Canada.
Thank you.
Ottawa, the bureaucrats and the politicians acknowledge off the record, they acknowledge the number of 1 million undocumented people here. On the record, nada, nothing.
Well, yeah, but the undocumented people are the ones that they have to have a way to arrive at that approximate number. So there are two types of undocumented people: irregular, illegal entrants. There are those who come here under a visa of some sort and then overstay their visa.
That's right.
And then there are the others who are either brought here by invitation. They're called refugees. And there's a segment, a subsegment of that. There are those that we've come to recently call border crossers.
Yeah.
The guys who appear on the border,
Yeah.
typically from the American border, and who say, I'm here, I want political asylum.
Yeah.
Am I right?
That's it.
So right now that number, you want to bring that thing back up again. I think that number for this last year was what is it? The bottom part says it's 58,435 refugees from last year. About 32,000 of them come from the southern border. So of those 58,000, when they appear here, what kind of rights do they have?
They have internationally defined rights. Canada signed on to the Convention on Refugees back in the 50s. In Ottawa, Canada is scrupulous in meeting its international obligations to those people.
But there's nothing wrong with that.
Absolutely nothing.
I just want to make that clear, that nobody's against it.
When you make a deal internationally, you got to keep your word or get out of the deal.
Okay.
And they have the right to work, welfare, housing, lawyers, but most important, they have a right to a full hearing.
Well, what about the kids?
The kids of the parents, also of the refugees.
But the children themselves.
The children, if their parents are refugees, they have a right. Now, the children of the non-refugees, of the million folks who are here not as refugees, those kids do not have any right to any interview, to any hearing. They never see an immigration officer until they get the boot.
Well, that confuses me. So
Confusion, Joe.
No, but just a minute, it confuses me. Because over the course of this last week, we've been talking about the Supreme Court decision of December 10th, 2015.
Yeah.
That's less than 3 years ago.
Yep.
And that Supreme Court decision says you've got to take into consideration the best interests of the child. The child should not be allowed to suffer unduly or suffer, period. How can you take that into consideration, Joe, if you're not going to hear the kid?
Joe, if you get a parking ticket, you have a right to a hearing in front of a judge. You have prosecutors, you have cops, you have witnesses for a lousy parking ticket. But if you're a child even though the Supreme Court ordered the officials and the government to determine if that kid will suffer any hardship. That decision is made by paper processing. You put a file on it, you put a stamp, and you send it to some faceless bureaucrat. The kid is not called, the kid is not seen, nothing, nada.
Is the assumption that the child is well represented by the parents?
The assumption in this Alice in Wonderland bureaucratic world in Ottawa, the assumption is that an officer can make a decision without ever seeing that child.
So you've got me asking this question.
Okay.
So the parent can't speak on the child's behalf, but the public guardian. Is there one for the kids at all?
Absolutely. In Ottawa, no. Here in Ontario, every province makes sure that the rights of the kids are protected. Whether for any issue in Ontario, we have the Office of the Official Guardian that protects those kids. In Ottawa, they have a lawyer who, whether officially or unofficially, looks into the situation of kids in detention. However, the kids, Bruno Nev's kids, they were never seen by an officer. There was no official guardian. This kid's rights were not protected. They say the court will protect. You got the money?
No, hold on. How do they protect the interests of Bruno and Ariana's kids if what they do is they say, you've got to leave with your parents? How is that protection? Now, yesterday we pointed out what the murder rate was in the province from where Bruno and his wife came.
Sure.
And it's a huge per 100,000, 58.49%. In Ontario, population 50% higher, is only 1.74. There were 5,474 murders, and they thought that was in the best interest of the child?
Well, once again, because for me, I'm an old timer. And I think that.
So the coloration of your hair hasn't affected you.
Well, maybe it has, I don't know. The old law made it really clear, whether it's a parking ticket, or whether it's a kid's rights, or whether it's a refugee, or whether it's any problem to do with government, if the decider of facts, if the officer, if the judge cannot see the person who's affected, then we don't know what happens. And what practically speaking happens, those officers that reviewed Bruno's kid's file, they were getting memos and guidelines from Ottawa. The Supreme Court said the officer is not supposed to fetter his discretion. That means the officer can't tie his hands when he's making a decision. But Ottawa demands that the kids.
Well, I like this concept of fettering and not fettering. So, my experience is just a little bit different. And the experience is this. So correct me if I'm wrong here. So there's the process, the procedure. So we're looking at refugees and we're looking at some applicants under humanitarian and compassionate grounds, because these are the people who fall under that undocumented, irregular worker business. So the minister gives instructions to the department that says, this is what must happen. This is what I want you to do. And in the event, because in this country we say, let's take a look at the point system. Now, these are people who, they don't have a proven degree of establishment or potential establishment in Canada. But, like in Bruno's case and Ariana's case, they've been here for 4 years. They've proven they can integrate.
But if Bruno, there's a law that says that if Bruno cannot meet a specific detail of the law,
whatever that is,
because nobody's perfect,
right?
Except maybe you, but all ministers are former.
When I was young and vainglorious, I used to believe that, but I'm not either now. So
the law says that if a guy like Bruno may not be perfect, but he's established, he's making money, he's paying taxes, and he may be a great asset to this country, the law says he can make that application and say, look, consider my file, even though I may not be perfect.
Why? Under what grounds?
It's called substitutive evaluation.
Well, what is substitutive evaluation?
That means that an officer can look at the whole picture.
Right.
Will this guy be able to establish himself successfully economically in Canada?
That's That's novel, isn't it?
Well, this has been going on for 150 years.
Where, in immigration?
In immigration, that law has been there since day one. When you were there, that law was there. And now,
Well, I used to like to think that that was my discretion. I could make the decision.
that the immigration officers have the decision, and sometimes two officers have to sign off on a decision. Now, let me tell you what happens in reality. If Bruno sends his application to the government and says, please assess me that I'm an asset here. I pay taxes, my kids go to school, my boss needs me, everything. Ottawa will not even open the application. They're going to send it back.
Well, that sounds crazy, but
Well,
there's
crazy?
gotta-
What do you mean crazy?
No, but
That's what happens.
No, look, you wanted to cite the experience that was there when I was there, and I don't know whether it's valid or not, but I always thought that if you had discretion, you had to either use it or explain why you didn't use it. But I wanted to ask you
Well,
something.
since 2013, officers have been instructed not to use their discretion when a guy says he's applying as a successful economic person.
So, excuse me for being blunt. Is that the reason why we have 1 million people who are undocumented and who are unprocessed?
You know, Ottawa figures that if a square peg doesn't fit into a round hole, we won't let him stay, and we assume he's going to leave.
But there's another.
But they don't leave.
But I'm asking you if there's another sector where this example of substitutive evaluation might take place.
Yeah, there's something called the Federal Skilled Trades Program.
Yeah, but let's move away from that because we're talking about kids for a moment.
Okay.
We can come back to that at all. So where does that fit in with kids?
The kids fit in under the humanitarian compassionate rule. But as the numbers showed, from 1 million people, and a lot of those people are applying to stay here on the H&C humanitarian process,
Right.
only 3,900 individuals. It's 3 per family or 4 per family. That's under 1,000. So what Ottawa does is, well, we've got 1 million people, and our quota
Well, that's
will,
wrong.
will be
I don't
3
even
to
want to go down to
5,000.
quota. If you got 1 million people who are here on an irregular basis, and your first objective ought to be that you regularize them, otherwise you can't do proper
There
demographic
is
immigration
look
policy.
up until May 2018, no prime minister in this country even acknowledged the existence of an undocumented. When you were there publicly, you worked hard. You worked hard but your prime minister wouldn't acknowledge it.
Well, he gave me the free rein to do it.
Well,
Yeah, I don't want to criticize him. He said, you're the Minister of Immigration, you do your job.
and you tried your best. And since then, what's happened?
Well, I don't want to judge
Nothing.
everybody. All I'm doing,
It
what I want to
doesn't-
do is that, Richard, I want to ask you, and I want to go back to the
okay.
item, because I used to do something else before I entered politics. And so when I was asking you this substitutive evaluation, where did this concept come from? Is it used in another sector?
It's the same. It's the same as schools, high school. When you were in the education business,
Yes.
and if a kid left school at 18, he didn't graduate, what would happen?
Well, the guy would probably go out to work, and somebody would say eventually, you can't move up the next ladder until you can show me that you got a diploma.
And then what happened?
Well, then he'd come back to the school and he'd say, listen, can you give me equivalency status? Well, what the heck is equivalency status? Well, the Education Act allows a principal to take a look at a person's, an applicant's file and say, is that experience, life experience, worth another credit?
You see, and then does the system work?
And then eventually the guy would get his diploma.
And the system works.
Well, the system, for
And
me,
Canadians
that it worked,
and
yes.
the Canadian people, being a very fair-minded bunch of people, will accept that GED certificate, a substituted certificate, as a high school diploma. Correct?
Exactly.
Well, Joe, it's the same in the immigration business. Canadians are very fair-minded people. They don't want to be ripped off by queue jumpers. They don't want liars. But Canadians are prepared to accept the fact that of those 1 million people, there's got to be some good folks, and the system allows those people to be those diamonds in the rough to be found, and immigration officers have the authority to do that.
Well,
the
there's
government does not allow immigration officers to give the kid a chance.
Well, that's wrong. You know, yeah, I'm sorry. I
Well, it's
shouldn't
also
say that. I'm
illegal.
moralizing.
Forget wrong. It's illegal.
Well, you know, the law says it's there. You've got to apply it.
And this is
apply
the
it.
problem with Bruno. Okay, we're very happy today because we won a federal court. But look at the cost. Because the government is so pig-headed and will not enforce the laws at the lower level, and will not allow immigration officers to enforce substitute evaluation, and will not even interview a kid. They will on a parking ticket, but not on a kid. And because of that stupidity, that illegal behavior, we had to go to federal court and spend a ton of money. And the Department of Justice is free. I mean, those poor lawyers.
Well, those lawyers get paid.
Some do.
No, but at the Justice Department,
Well,
they get paid.
It must be heartbreaking for those lawyers at the Justice Department to get instructions from their bosses saying, go to federal court, go to court, spend a lot of time, spend a lot of taxpayer money, and argue that Bruno's kids should not be allowed to stay in this country.
So the perception that, you
Send
know,
them back to a civil war zone. Don't interview them. That must rip those lawyers apart.
you're telling me that lawyers actually have a heart?
It's beaten into them sometimes.
Yeah, well, okay, well, that's good. Well, listen, you know, we're going to continue on this because
Sure.
there's another theme that I would like to. So I'd like you to just hold on with
Okay.
some of this because I want to do what we did the other day. I want to give a shout out to the Undocumented Workers Committee who have been laboring hard to bring these issues
Yep.
to the fore.
Yep.
Nothing's going to get resolved unless people ask the kinds of questions that we're asking here
That's
today.
right.
The Undocumented Workers Committee is sponsoring Stop the Deportation of Our Children lunch on September the 9th. I want to give them a shout out. There it is right there. And it gives all the particulars.
Great bunch of people.
And if nothing else, you've got to give them support. I think they deserve our support. They deserve the support of Corcan Media Group,
Absolutely.
of Go Live TV, Corriere Canadese, and I hope of Borax and Volpe. And on that note, I'd like to invite everybody to follow us on all social media, to follow us on Corriere Canadese. They can follow us in Portuguese, in Italian, and in English. We're expanding, and we hope to provide a more stable agenda for these discussions. And until the next time, we wish everybody a good weekend. We thank you for watching. Thank you to Corcan Media Group, to Go Live TV, and to Corriere Canadese, and to our guest.
Sir.
Thank you, Mr. Borax.
Thank you.